My boyfriend took me to a fancy restaurant and pretended to propose, but the ring box had a note that said you've been pranked. So, I'm a 24-year-old woman and I've been with my boyfriend, Andrew, who's 26, for 5 years now. We met back in college at a house party that my roommate practically dragged me to during my sophomore year. Honestly, I didn't even want to go, but she was insistent that I needed to get out more. Anyway, Andrew was at this party with his friends, cracking everyone up with his stories and jokes. We hit it off when I went to grab another drink. It was like an instant connection. In our friend group, Andrew's always been the funny guy, the one with the jokes and pranks. When we first started dating, his pranks were small and adorable, like little scavenger hunts around campus leading to a sweet gift or a picnic. Sometimes, he'd pretend he forgot my birthday, only to surprise me later. I didn't mind because the pranks were usually harmless and sometimes really funny. I'm not super serious either, so I'd prank him back every now and then. After dating for about 3 years, we moved in together into this cozy 2-bedroom apartment in a nice neighborhood. We intended to use the second bedroom as an office, but it just turned into a storage spot for all our extra stuff. We've been saving up for a house over the past year, and recently, we found a place we both liked. Generally, things were going well between us. Sure, we had small arguments typical of any couple, like him leaving clothes all over the floor or me using up all the hot water during showers, but nothing too serious, or so I thought. As time went by, Andrew's pranks started getting a little more annoying. He'd hide my car keys when I was already running late, or he'd fake call me saying my mom had an emergency. Once, he had me believing our landlord was selling the building, and we had 2 weeks to move out. I was super stressed looking for a new place, only to find out it was a joke. I was really mad, but he apologized and promised not to do something like that again. But, of course, that didn't really stop him. He came up with new ways to mess with me, like hiding behind doors to jump scare me or swapping sugar for salt in my coffee. At one point, he told me my car got towed, but it was just parked elsewhere. I'd get mad sometimes, but usually, I'd laugh it off because that's just Andrew. Plus, he'd always act hurt if I got too upset, saying things like, "I was just trying to make you laugh," or "you used to have a sense of humor." So, I guess I just got used to it. But a few days ago, he really crossed a line, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. It was a regular day until Andrew woke me up at 7 a.m. on a weekend, which was weird because he usually sleeps in. He was all excited, saying he was taking me to the spa. I was confused since it wasn't a special day like my birthday or our anniversary, but hey, who turns down a spa day? So, we went to this fancy spa downtown that I've been dying to try but could never afford, and he paid for everything. I kept asking him why, and he just smiled, saying, "Can't I just treat my girlfriend sometimes?" I got a bit suspicious but thought maybe he got a work bonus or something he hadn't mentioned yet. After the spa, he told me we had dinner reservations at this upscale waterfront restaurant with a glass ceiling I've always wanted to try. At this point, I was really thinking something was up. The restaurant was amazing, probably the nicest place we'd ever been, and Andrew even pre-ordered champagne for us. Everything was so perfect, and I started getting this feeling in my stomach like maybe something big was about to happen. Over dinner, we chatted about the usual stuff, and then Andrew brought up the house we liked, fantasizing about furniture and how we'd decorate it. He casually mentioned turning a room into a nursery someday, making me blush because we'd never even talked about having kids before. It all felt so perfect, like we were making real progress toward a future together. Then, as we were finishing our main courses, Andrew got this serious look on his face. He reached for my hand, gazing right into my eyes. Then he stood up, and my heart literally stopped. I had a feeling about what was coming, even though we hadn't really talked seriously about marriage. He got down on one knee right there in the middle of the restaurant, and people started noticing so, the place was starting to get really quiet, and some people even whipped out their phones to record. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out this tiny black velvet box. Then he started giving this heartfelt speech about how I was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen and couldn't imagine his life without me. He mentioned our first date and how he knew right from the start that I was special. At this point, I was bawling. I couldn't believe what was happening. Then he asked, "Will you marry me, my princess?" And without even thinking, I said, "Yes." The whole restaurant just exploded with applause. An older couple at the table next to us were smiling and even wiping tears from their eyes. The waiter came over with champagne, on the house. But then, everything took a nosedive. He opened the box, and instead of a ring, there was this small folded piece of paper. He was grinning in this way that I didn't recognize, and I knew something was up. I opened the paper and it said, "You've been pranked," in his handwriting. His face lit up with laughter, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. He was almost in hysterics, saying it was just a prank and that he wasn't ready to really propose. He even had the nerve to joke about the look on my face. Suddenly, everything went dead silent. I could feel everyone's eyes on us, and even the waiters were frozen. The older couple who were all smiles a moment ago now looked horrified. I just sat there, humiliated, tears streaming down but not from happiness anymore. He tried to hug me like we were both in on this joke, but I snapped and slapped him hard. I had never hit anyone before, but in that moment, I couldn't help it. I grabbed my purse, stood up, and told him, "We're over, you scumbag," then walked out. I had to call an Uber because he had driven us there. I sobbed the whole ride home, and the driver was kind enough to make sure I got inside safely before leaving. Once I got home, I packed a small bag and called my friend Lisa, asking if I could crash at her place for a few days. She didn't hesitate, telling me to come right over. I didn't leave Andrew a note, I didn't think he deserved one. He's been blowing up my phone ever since, with texts ranging from "babe, it was just a joke. Don't overreact," to more desperate pleas like, "Please come home. I'm sorry. I didn't think you'd take it so seriously." I haven't replied to any of his messages. I keep replaying that awful moment in my head. I really thought we had a future together. We were saving for a house, talked about getting a dog, and even planned a vacation next month to visit his family. Now, I don't know what to do. Part of me never wants to see him again, but we share an apartment, bank accounts, and we're planning to buy a house. Our lives are so tangled after 5 years. Lisa thinks I should block his number and move on, but it's not that simple. I still have to figure out our living situation, our shared stuff, all of it. Plus, a small part of me still loves him, despite everything. Some people have asked if I was in on the prank, which is just crazy. Why would I make up something so mortifying? And yeah, the spa day and dinner were legit, he paid for everything. Some have suggested maybe he wanted to propose for real but chickened out. I wondered that too, but with what happened next, I'm pretty sure that wasn't the case. After all this went down, I stayed with Lisa for a few days. She was amazing, letting me cry on her shoulder and distracting me with trashy reality TV. I turned my phone off because I just couldn't deal with Andrew blowing it up. When I finally turned it back on, I saw 47 missed calls and over 100 texts, not just from Andrew but from mutual friends too. Apparently, he's been telling everyone that I overreacted to a harmless joke. That just made me so mad, I decided I needed to confront him in person and set the record straight, so I went back to our place without telling him I was coming. So, I showed up, and there he was, still in his pajamas even though it was already afternoon. He looked like he hadn't slept or showered in days. For a split second, I felt kind of sorry for him, but then I remembered what he did, and all my sympathy just disappeared. I told him straight up we were done. I said I couldn't be with someone who, after 5 years, still wasn't ready for marriage and thought it was cool to make a joke about it in front of a whole restaurant. That's when things got ugly. First, he cried and begged me to reconsider, saying he loved me more than anything and couldn't imagine life without me. He promised he'd never prank me again. But when he realized I wasn't changing my mind, he got angry. I'd never seen him like that before. He started yelling about how I was leaving him like this after everything he did for me. He went on this long rant about how he supported me when my dad died and how he always had my back. He even mentioned the money he spent on the spa day and dinner, like that somehow made up for embarrassing me. He was cussing so much I kind of stopped listening after a point. The thing that stuck out was when he said, "Don't be so petty and drop it. You know we're happy together, and you know you still want me." That's when I lost it. I called him every name in the book and told him exactly what I thought about his pranks and childish behavior. We were both yelling so loud the neighbor knocked on the wall. That kind of snapped us out of it, and we calmed down enough to talk about practical stuff. We agreed not to renew our apartment lease, and he'd sleep in the guest room for now. I spent the rest of the day clearing out space in the guest room so he could move his stuff in there. Then I went online to start looking at apartments I could afford on my own. Our lease isn't up for another 4 months, so we'd ideally find someone to take it over, but that might be tough with the current rental scene. Andrew still isn't accepting the breakup. Throughout the day, he keeps trying to talk to me, saying things like, "Can't we get back together?" and insisting it was just a small mistake. At dinner, we ordered takeout and ate separately, me in the bedroom and him in the living room. He came knocking on the door, asking if we could talk about this like adults. I told him we'd already talked, and there was nothing more to say. Oh, and get this, he apparently told his family what happened, but I'm guessing he gave them a very different version. His mom called me that evening and went off on me for being selfish and not being able to handle a simple joke. She mentioned how Andrew had been planning the spa day for weeks as a treat for me, which might be true, but it doesn't excuse what happened after. The call ended with her calling me a name before hanging up, which I found ironic coming from someone who cheated on her husband and thought nobody knew. After that, I started getting messages from his siblings, dad, and even his aunt, all saying the same thing, that I was overreacting, Andrew was devastated, and I should give him another chance. His younger sister, who I used to be close to, sent this long guilt-trippy message about how Andrew had been crying nonstop and couldn't eat or sleep. His older brother, who I never liked, was more direct, calling me heartless and saying I was throwing away a good man over nothing. I tried blocking their numbers, but they keep finding new ways to contact me. His mom even emailed my work address. How she got that I have no idea. It's exhausting having to constantly defend my decision to people who weren't even there and don't know the full story. I don't think much else will happen in the next few days. I'm focusing on selling stuff I don't need anymore, finding a new place to live, and sorting out the apartment situation. Andrew and I are trying to be civil when we have to interact, but it's tense. He keeps giving me these sad puppy eyes that used to work on me but now just make me angry. I'm also dealing with the practical stuff of disentangling our lives. We didn't share all our finances, thankfully, but we do have that joint savings account we were using for a house down payment. I'll talk to the bank tomorrow about how to split that. Then there's all the stuff we bought together. It's going to be a nightmare figuring out who gets what. Thanks again for all the support. It really means a lot knowing there are people out there who don't think I'm overreacting. I'll update again if anything significant happens. Update 2, so much has happened since I last posted, I don't even know where to begin. I guess I'll start with the living arrangement, which didn't work out at all. The idea of Andrew sleeping in the guest room lasted about a few days before it became unbearable. We kept having these massive fights every evening. So, he'd always start with attempting to apologize, but when I didn't accept it, he'd get annoyed and eventually blame me for ruining everything over a silly joke. The first night wasn't too bad, we managed to avoid each other, and I thought maybe things might work out until we sorted out the apartment issue. But the second night, he knocked on my bedroom door around midnight, clearly drunk, trying to get me to chat. I didn't open the door, and he eventually left. The third night was a nightmare. He came home from work in a bad mood, slamming doors and mumbling. When I asked him what was up, he lost it, saying I was the problem and that I was being unreasonable, throwing away 5 years over a little mistake. We ended up in a huge fight, and he threw a glass against the wall, not at me, but still terrifying. I ended up locking myself in my room and called Lisa, crying. I realized then I couldn't stay there, it wasn't safe or healthy. Lisa offered me a place to stay until I found my own, so the next day, while Andrew was at work, I packed up everything I could fit in my car and left. I left him a note about where I was going and said I'd be in touch about the apartment. When he came home and found me gone, he went nuts, calling me nonstop. When I finally answered, he was switching between crying and yelling, accusing me of abandoning him and stealing from our place. I tried explaining I only took my things, but he wouldn't listen. He even threatened to report my car as stolen and toss the rest of my stuff out if I didn't come back. I got so worried I called his brother, who's the most reasonable one in his family, and asked him to check on Andrew. His brother agreed and later texted me, saying Andrew was just upset and he'd stay with him for a bit. The whole apartment situation is still a mess. The worst was bumping into Andrew's mom at the mall. I was just buying clothes since I left a lot behind when I heard someone shouting my name. I turned, and there she was, charging at me with absolute fury, yelling in the middle of the mall. It was mortifying. She kept screaming about how I ruined Andrew's life and that I'd regret leaving a good man. I didn't bother defending myself, just walked away. A security guard even asked if I needed help, which was nice but embarrassing. The messages from Andrew, his friends, and family haven't stopped and are getting nastier. I've received texts telling me no one would care if I died, calling me names, and saying I left over a small joke. I've even gotten a few threatening messages from unknown numbers saying they know where I work. I reported them to the police, but they weren't too concerned unless something actually happened. I try to ignore the messages, but sometimes they really get to me, and I break down. Lisa's been awesome, letting me cry it out and reassuring me I did the right thing. She even took my phone for a weekend to give me a break from all the negativity. This whole mess has shown me who my true friends are. Some I thought were friends sided with Andrew, saying I was overreacting or should have given him another chance. I'm looking for my own place, but it's tough finding something affordable on my salary alone. I might need a roommate, which isn't great, but better than staying with Lisa forever or, heaven forbid, going back to Andrew. The whole situation feels unreal. If you'd told me a month ago I'd be single, living with a friend, and dealing with this kind of harassment, I wouldn't have believed you. Andrew and I were together for so long, I just assumed we'd always be together. Now, I have to start over from scratch.